Hi guys, I'm here today to talk about the fair folk and Samhain. There are actually really big links between the fair folk and Samhain, and I think sometimes that gets overlooked because obviously we focus a lot on our ancestors at Samhain, just as we should. Well, then and at other parts of the year as well. Obviously, it's important to keep a relationship with them all year round. Ancestors are for life and beyond, not just for Samhain. Just like a puppy is for life and not for Christmas. Anyway, so this video will be more of a coming from more of a Celtic viewpoint, because that's my practice and my family's practice come more from the Celtic views, and we have heritage in both England and Ireland that we know about. I'm not sure if we have any others, but those are where our sort of traditions, if you like, come from more. So the Celts believed that the day began with darkness, so it was the opposite to us, really. The beginning of the day was sunset, and that carried through across their times into their celebrations. So that means that at Samhain, the celebrations begin at sunset on the 31st. They can carry on for 3 days. It has been heard of that in the Celtic courts and some of the Celtic families, the traditions were that they actually party for about 2-3 weeks. So, you know, do what you like. But most of the time it said that it was 3 days. So at Samhain, the barriers between the worlds were said to literally sort of fall down, and where normally you would have certain pathways or portals where beings could cross from the spirit world and the world of the fair folk. Usually, obviously, they would have to come through that area, whereas at Samhain, they could essentially cross anywhere at any point at any time. And it was much easier for them to do this because of the barriers falling down. It had actually been heard of that some beings crossed accidentally and had to be helped back, including souls of the dead. It was said that the dead rose from their graves and that the fair folk could travel openly and freely across the land in our world. It was a time where trooping fair folk moved and battles and sports were rife. The solitary members of the fair folk, particularly the darker ones, would be seen to make use of the longer dark hours to lure travellers off their pathways. Obviously, if you think about travelling in daylight, even in your car actually, and travelling in the night time, the daylight makes it very easy to see the obstacles in front of you. It makes it easy to find your way. You can see signposts, you can read maps more easily, and so on. Now, in the ancient times, of course, there were no street lights, there were no inside of car lights, and so the travellers could get easily lost and easily confused. And the fair folk were said to really make use of that. And of course, they could be lured by the lights of the will-o'-the-wisps and so on off the pathway. So yeah, that's something to think about really if you are travelling on Samhain, and to make sure that you have protections in place. I'll probably come back to that slightly later. Now, in the Celtic beliefs, the fair folk are said to have a hierarchy consisting of heroics, gentry and rustics. The heroics are the aristocrats, really. They like sport and hunting. They also have battles. They're said to be very powerful and extremely beautiful. The gentry are seen as more the middle class, it's said that they have the most interaction, if you like, with humans, even interbreeding at different points and in different legends. Some people would probably still claim that in Ireland today that they have a fair folk in their ancestry. The gentry liked sporting games, but they also needed to work. And I think that's partly why they come into contact more with humans, because their work takes them into the human environment. And so the contact there is made, and you are therefore more likely to need to make a treaty with them. The rustics were really seen as the peasants of old. The hierarchy is more of a medieval, I suppose, way of looking at things. And you do, obviously there's still hierarchy now, and there's still classes, but people move more easily between the classes, and the class barriers are a little bit more blurred. And I would say that actually that has carried over to the fair folk. And from my own workings, I have seen that there is slightly less of a clear boundary between all of them, and you might get people who are between gentry and rustic. Now, the rustics were said to be less strong. However, of course, if you don't know what you're doing, then any encounter with a fair folk can be dangerous. They were also, and in my experience, I've certainly found this, that the rustics are incredibly hardworking and can be linked to a skill. So they may have a skill of baking, or because of course food is very important in fairyland, and if you eat of the food you shall never return. But it can also be said to drive you mad, because it is so delicious that you cannot eat of any other food, because it will taste like ash in comparison. One of my favourite legends actually is the Irish one, that if there is a wind whipping up leaves, it's the fair folk fighting, and you should say the words "God bless you." They used to take off their hat, but obviously we're less likely to have a hat, so simply the words "God bless you" will do. It's believed that on the last day of November, the dead who had risen from their graves would dance with the fair folk, and that was, if you like, the closing ceremony. Some people believe that this happens on Halloween, and others believe that it happens throughout, from the last day of October throughout November. But most people would say the last day of November is when the dead dance. You should never ever disturb this closing ceremony for fear of being robbed, taken, or killed. Equally, the fair folk don't like to be disturbed during processions or raids, and these often happen when the fair folk are moving. Sorry, my cat's just coming from the garden. When the fair folk are moving from their summer homes to the winter homes, and sometimes they may simply go hunting, sometimes they may simply go out on a ride. And if you see a hunt, then it's very often a court, and this would usually contain aristocrats, the heroics, hello baby, and the heroics, and also the shoemaker. And it's said that the fairies danced so much that they wore out their shoes, and that is why the leprechaun and the shoemaker needed to come along with them. If you see moving homes, it may be a court, but it may also be members of the gentry, a community, and even possibly some of the rustics moving from their summer mound to their winter. Now, apologies, coffee needed. The fair folk are said to be attracted to very strong emotion, and some people actually believe that significant life passages create a signal or disturbance in the other world, which calls the fair folk to come. They are said to be aware of births, deaths, christenings, and even sometimes weddings. And some people believe that they're psychopomps guiding the recently dead from one world to another. Now, I would say I haven't come across any psychopomp fair folk myself, but I could easily believe that that would be the case, particularly because they are so linked to the dead, really. They were known to entice souls to fairyland. Now, fairyland obviously has different names. Some people might call it Tinanog, Don's land, Don, who was the first ancestor, and also the first to die, therefore really being the first ancestor and king of the dead. Some people may call it Elfame. Now, they enticed living souls, but they also enticed the dying and the recently dead. So if a young child died, the parents would actually leave a blood offering to distract the fair folk from taking that child's soul. Some of the souls that were taken that were alive did return. And so it's believed that not all of the souls who ride with the Fae, not all of them are deceased souls and belonging to the dead. And some of them may return, although it's rare. In Western Ireland, the king was said to steal women away to dance with, despite the fact he had a queen. Now, often these women were believed dead, but some of them did return, and when they described their experiences, they had actually had a beautiful and joyous life, in fact quite ecstatic really, within the court. And it's from them that the stories come. Now, you've also got fair folk linked to the wild hunt, and some people, well, lots of different people view this very differently. So you obviously have the original Norse myth of Odin's wild hunt on his 8-legged horse, but you also have the Celtic legends of Don, the first ancestor and king of the dead, who would ride out and collect souls on his way, but also have his souls already, who would ride with him across the land. Some people would also say that his queen may ride out, or they may ride together, and the Scots would call the queen of Elfame, usually, or the Lady of Elfame. Sometimes Elfame is spelled Elphame, and sometimes the PH is changed to an F, so it's Elfame. I know that it can be difficult to pronounce some of the words when you're from a different culture. So yeah, sometimes I find that it's easier with other people when they spell it out. But there are so many variations of the wild hunt, and obviously you've got the more Wiccan idea of, the sort of Kernanos, like God really, or sometimes Pan, like who rides out. Although I don't know too much about that because I don't follow a Wiccan path myself. However, in almost all of these myths, it's agreed that they fly across the ground, that the hunt contains otherworldly beings and includes souls of the dead. It's often said that the chase itself and the game of the hunt is more important than the kill or the steal. Being the victim, you're filled with an absolute terror. However, if you are caught up within the hunting party itself, it's just great excitement and great fun. Though, from what I have heard, pretty overwhelming. Now, you would often leave out treaty offerings to the wild hunt or the trooping fairies. so as not to be taken, not to be disturbed. Often trooping fairies were said to pull down houses, to take off roofs, all sorts of things, to steal. Obviously, famously, the fair folk get into the buttermilk, or yeah, anywhere where there's like milk, cream, butter being churned. That's the most famous Irish-based belief and experience. So you may leave out a treaty offering, really, to say, right, I've left this for you, now respectfully pass. That's definitely something that my family do. Now, different offerings could include, some people would leave out a full meal, but a lot of people wouldn't want to do this, and may not even have the money to. So you can give the best parts of your meal. You can give, this goes as well for the souls, because obviously the souls of the dead are travelling with them, or some of them are, and there will be souls passing where you are anyway. So leaving offerings for the Fae, you can dedicate some to the Fae, you can dedicate some to the souls of the dead, and do it that way. You may have an ancestor altar where you leave offerings out for your ancestors. So it can be nice to just set up a quick temporary thing in the garden. It can traditionally be left on the doorstep or on the windowsill, and that's good enough. The apple, of course, is a brilliant offering. It's the food of Tir na Nog, and also, of course, of the mythological Avalon. And the Norse also associated this with youth. Now, Tir na Nog and Avalon were really said to be the land of youth. So that's kind of where that comes from, and obviously links back again to the dead, and to how the fair folk are said to have eternal life. Although I believe, was it Keats? One of the romantic poets said that he saw a fairy's funeral, but personally I believe that this was a human soul who had been taken to fairyland and was not given eternal life, and therefore died. So he had a fair folk funeral, but wasn't a member of the fair folk herself. So yeah, the eternal life of the Fae, and also, of course, the souls that they then take, who have become essentially forever young again. So yeah, meals, best parts of your meals: apple, milk, of course, and butter. And it's a good time to offer to any fair folk in your home. Samhain is a brilliant time to get in touch with your brownie if you haven't already, and of course I've got another video on that. Now, our ancestors put on costumes in order to confuse or scare away some of the less well-meaning fair folk, and of course that's still a tradition today with trick-or-treating. That's part of where it comes from. So obviously, if you go out, that's a great thing to do. You can also use charms to keep you protected. Hazelnuts and rowan charms were very common. You could also use charms which are symbolic. Maybe some people would use sigils or runes to keep them safe. And then, of course, you have the bonfire, which was used to not only guide loved ones back, but also to keep the evil spirits at bay. And it was said that members of the fair folk who were ill-meaning were scared away by the bonfire. There was also, of course, the jack-o'-lanterns, which originally were turnips or similar root-type vegetables, and are now, of course, pumpkins, often anyway. So yeah, those are all things you can do. It is worth noting that if you're a witch, the fair folk are going to respond differently to you. And it's known that the fair folk are aware it's the night witches come together to cast, to divine, to journey, to celebrate, and to honour their dead. And so you're going to be more respected if you're a witch. It's not going to be the same sort of relationship as it would with a muggle, I guess, or a non-magic one. Had to slip in a Harry Potter reference there. But yeah, so of course that will be different. Hello, baby. Sorry, my cat's here, but she's a house cat, so she's on a lead coming in from the garden, and she wants to come in, but her sister's outside and doesn't want to. Oh, Chels. Let's let you off. You have to go back on it in a minute to go back out. Anyway, sorry about that. So yes, so they will respond differently. And I found that personally, that's personal experience. Of course, other people may have not found that, but I have. Samhain was a really important time for the Celts to renew their protection and assess their defences. In times gone by, the protection to withstand the winter was being installed for livestock and also for the home and the land. If you haven't already, it's a really good time to just go around your house and redo any witch balls, check and clear spirit traps. I refresh my rosemary wreath. I offer treaty to the trooping fair folk. I renew charms. Sometimes I set up new ones, or heighten the ones that are already there, if you like. So yeah, that's a really important thing to do. And obviously it can tie in with working with the fair folk, because you have those treaty offerings. You have also charms that you can make or purchase, or sometimes get given by a member of the fair folk that you're working with, to protect you from those who mean harm, and those fair folk who just dislike humans, basically, and who mean to prey on them. So yeah, that's those are some things that you can have a go at. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I'll be coming back with some more about the fair folk, and maybe some other things as well. So yeah, I hope you have a beautiful, blessed Samhain,